Hey, Busy Bees. Today we are back with another chapter in our My Word School series, Book 7, Mrs. Cooney is Loony by Dan Gutman. But before we get into our chapter of the day, we are going to get into our riddle of the day. And the riddle of the day is, why do they serve snail at fancy restaurants? And I'll tell you again, why do they serve snail at fancy restaurants? And I will give you the answer to our riddle at the end of our chapter. So let's pop open the book and fly through this adventure together. Yesterday, we talked about chapter 8, where they all worked together to be able to find evidence that Mrs. Cooney was in fact a spy. Chapter 9, Vowel, Movement, and the Third Degree. I was all mixed up. I was in love with Mrs. Cooney and wanted to grow up and marry her. But what if she was secretly a spy who was selling information to some guy who wanted to take over the world? I was starting to feel sick. I mean, really sick, not fake sick. AJ, you don't look so good, Miss Daisy said. Do you need to go to the nurse's office? No, I said. Not that. I'm fine. AJ, I want you to go to the nurse's office, Miss Daisy said. Now. So I went to Mrs. Cooney's office. Hi, AJ, she said cheerfully. Feeling a little under the weather? No, I feel fine, I said. Can I go back to class? Not so fast. Oh no, she was going to have me stand on my head or juggle ping pong balls or put her Beanie Babies in ABC order or something equally weird. I want to ask you a few questions, said Mrs. Cooney. When was your last bowel movement? Huh? I didn't quite hear what she said. Bowel movement? What's that? I didn't know what a bowel was, so how could I possibly know if it moved? I didn't want Mrs. Cooney to know that I didn't know what a bowel movement was. Maybe she said bowel movement. That would make more sense. Vowels move all the time, but I didn't know which vowel she was talking about. A, I guessed. I said, when was your last bowel movement? Mrs. Cooney asked. Why? I asked. Why? Said Mrs. Cooney. Because that will help me know what's wrong with you. I didn't know what vowels had to do with what was wrong with me. I owe you? I said. You owe me what? Mrs. Cooney asked. AJ, can you please just answer my questions? What did you have for breakfast today? That's when it hit me. Mrs. Cooney was doing what all those cops do with bad guys. She was giving me the third degree. What if I told her some important piece of top secret information? And what if she sold it to the bad guy who wants to take over the world? And what if that guy took over the world? It would be my fault. The fate of the whole world was on my shoulders. I decided that I wasn't going to give Mrs. Cooney any information. I didn't care how beautiful she was. I wouldn't answer any of her questions, even if she shined that headlights light in my eyes. AJ, did you eat breakfast this morning? Mrs. Cooney asked. That's for me to know and you to find out, I said, crossing my arms in front of me. I beg your pardon, Mrs. Cooney said. I have the right to remain silent, I said. AJ, I only asked you if you ate breakfast. That's classified information, I replied. Who wants to know? I want a lawyer. Don't be silly, AJ. Are you going to torture me? I asked. That's what they do in movies. AJ, you're acting very strangely today, Mrs. Cooney said. Oh, she thinks I'm strange? She puts bags of frozen vegetables on kids' heads and makes them balance yardsticks. But I'm strange? By the time Mrs. Cooney let me go back to class, school was over. All the kids were gone. Miss Daisy gave me my backpack and told me what we had to do for homework. But that night, I couldn't do my homework. I had too much on my mind. I hate to admit that Andrea is right about anything, but she just might be right about Mrs. Cooney. What if she really is a spy? How could I marry her? And yet, she was so beautiful. All night long, I was tossing and turning in my bed. And that is the end of our chapter. Oh my gosh, that was so much information to unpack. I cannot even believe it. I hope that AJ is going to be okay because he wasn't feeling good. And also with Mrs. Cooney, she seems like she was just asking regular questions. Or was she? All right, so we're going to get into the answer of our riddle. Our riddle was, why do they serve serve snail at fancy restaurants? And the answer is, drum roll please, because their customers don't like fast food. Do you get it? Are snails fast or slow? If you said slow, you are correct. So the customers don't like fast food, meaning that all other food would be fast compared to a snail. If you like this video, give it a like. And if you'd like to follow along for more adventures, hit that subscribe button. And I will see you on the next one.